The gang drafts another FFPC main event. That's what we're doing today on Stealing Bananas. I'm Ben Gretch. You can find the Stealing Signals newsletter at bengretch.substack.com. With me, as always, is Shawn Siegele. You can find all of his great work over at RotoViz. And unfortunately, we drew a very similar draft slot today. We're at pick 8. We're coming to you live while pick 7 is on the clock. First 6 picks off the board: Chase, Gibbs, Bijan, Bowers, Lamb, Jefferson. Assuming this is going to be a Saquon Barkley pick. We took neighbors here last time. Amon-Ra St. Brown goes 7 there, Shawn. How weird are we planning to get tonight?
Well, I mean, pretty weird, and we need to be very different than last night. So, what are you feeling here?
I would be down to do a running back in the first round. What do you think?
We need a Saquon Barkley team.
Yeah, we'll take Saquon. He was the whole thing last year. We are going to do one team that we hate. No, I'm just kidding. This is going to be a quirky night. We're doing it even later than last night. I'll try to give away some more of Shawn's unwritten articles. I just got back from a dinner. I got up really early this morning and did an early podcast, so I've been kind of going all day today. And but I mean, you texted me a little bit ago, said, "Hey, should we jump into Maine?" I said, "Yeah, we should." But it's going to be a fun one.
So, what are your feelings on this Saquon Barkley situation here? You had mentioned that you wrote about him at the end of last year, and that one of the things you wanted to do was remind yourself that when we got in situations like this in 2025, to not act like Saquon Barkley wasn't the all-encompassing, the all-powerful superstar last season. And yet, not only does he not fare amazingly well in our rankings, he's now really sliding in fantasy, Ben, which, I mean, it's kind of funny because a lot of people got very justifiably bashed for what his rankings and whatnot were a season ago, and he's going, I mean, in some ways, he hasn't made that big of a jump in FFPC formats after what he went out there and did. And I actually think that he's got the possibility of catching more passes and scoring more short yardage touchdowns. Yes, the big plays are tough. But one of the things that I wrote in this Devon Achane article, which I'm a little bit less comfortable with when you consider how dysfunctional Miami is right now. But the big plays, yes, there's a lack of consistency there, but I went through things like Jamal Charles, Adrian Peterson, certainly Derrick Henry, even Saquon Barkley himself. I mean, you need a certain type of player to create the big plays. Maybe we don't get that from Barkley this season, but I mean, he was a monster. Maybe we do, and he's just the easy 101 again, and it feels weird that this price existed in August.
It really is one that it feels like the thing that the, pretty smart guy in your league that doesn't actually follow year-round fantasy advice, but is plugged in and pays attention to fantasy football, doesn't overthink and is like, I'm going to take Saquon Barkley this year. And then he goes out and wins your league. And you're like, well, but that wasn't fun. That's what happened last year. You're not allowed to do that. No, I mean, I think there's very real concerns about the way his profile scores and how high the ceiling actually is, even if he catches a few more passes, as you noted.
I mean, he could score 25 touchdowns.
There's a lot of different stuff here where like their offensive line is very good. Now they have an injury to who is it? Which one is it? Not Landon Dickerson, Lane Johnson. One of their main longtime guys is hurt. And they already lost Mekhi Becton, but they returned 4 starters. They added depth in the free agency and through the draft. They did not get complacent on their offensive line at all. They know that's their bread and butter. And then, yeah, I mean, everything that he brought last year, Barkley, where, I mean, I don't know. I remember writing one of the articles about the long runs, and it was funny. You were talking about all the different groups and the cohorts, and I think when I was doing my offseason Stealing Signals, I found a similar cohort, and there was only so many players who had, even more than like 3 runs of whatever the cutoff was. I'm just trying to find it right now, 40 plus or 50 plus yards or something since like 2000. And there were several that had like 3+. There's only 3 that had like 6+. He had 6+ of whatever this was. But one of the other guys who had 6+ was Saquon Barkley as a rookie. He had done it twice in this group. I mean, it even though it was several years until he did it again, it's something that, is clearly a skill set. This is clearly something he could do. The other one was that Adrian Peterson year that you referenced. I think it was 2012 for him. But there's, a group of guys that have done this stuff. And then most of them were not able to repeat the really, really long runs. But it doesn't mean that they're not still going to continue to be really good. We're back up here. The first 16 picks went sort of as expected. When you're at the 108, part of the reason we went running back there is you really feel like you're going to be staring at Drake London at 205. And it's kind of hard to get away from unless we want to build a Saquon Derrick Henry team.
No, we got to go with the guy who's going to lead the NFL in targets. But man, I mean, it's one of these where even though Drake London more or less is in the same group, you've got that tiny little tier break there where I've kind of come around to, if we hadn't taken Saquon Barkley, then I might have. It doesn't really make sense. We're going to have some other opportunities, but Brian Thomas is probably my next player, if not the guy that I like at like 106. And so him to get within one pick of us, he's going to go in that pick. He's been the best player on the board for a while, but it is still a little bit disappointing.
Disappointing that he goes at 204. You're saying that if we didn't go Barkley at 108 because we already did a neighbor's team, he's got a toe thing, we may have gone Brian Thomas at 108. He makes it back within one pick of the 205. But yeah, like you said, it seems like it's always London that gets left over. Nico, Puka go ahead of Thomas. Then whoever's in the 9 hole is just going to take Thomas. Trey McBride was the other one I was considering. We could have got a little weird and just went with an early McBride share. It feels weird to take McBride 8, 9, 10, something like that. I think in the past when we've had tight ends in this range in FFPC, you're like, well, they might come back around to the second round. All you need is a couple people on the turn who don't want to take a tight end. This year, it seems like McBride never comes back. I don't see him get into like the 203, 204 in any of these rooms. I'm not sure we've seen it quite a bit. So if you do want to build a Trey McBride team, it's tricky. Obviously, it's the second tight end. You got Brock Bowers out in front of him, but I do think he's meaningfully better profile than every other tight end in a year that is a thin year. And obviously we're hoping that Brock Bowers goes and has an amazing year, but if he doesn't, or if he gets injured or something, there's the possibility that Trey McBride is the best pick in fantasy because the tight end stuff that we're talking about with it being a little bit concerning, what the different profiles look like and the ability for some of these top guys to potentially gap. And Shawn, the last time we talked about the tight end position being down like this and the profile is not looking good and the top guys are probably going to gap was the year that Kelsey gapped it. And, I think we were taking a lot more Kyle Pitts that year. It was Kelsey, Pitts, and Andrews. It was like these 3 dudes, and the fact that there's no one else that has a meaningful upside scenario at tight end this year. I'm not saying there's no one else this year. I think George Kittle is incredibly good, but the fact that he didn't run a whole lot of routes last year, 15th in tight end routes in a year where McCaffrey ran 91 total routes and Brandon Ayuk was hurt and everything else. They don't want to expand his routes enough to hit a real ceiling, but he's tight end 3. He's incredibly efficient. He had peak efficiency last year. Laporta, Hawkinson, Warren, Tucker Kraft. I've talked about, David Njoku. These guys are not, it's not like there's nothing at tight end, but it really does feel like the group of profiles this year is going to have a hard time keeping up with Bowers and McBride. So it would have been fun to maybe do a McBride team. He never seems to make it back around.
Well, Ben, I'm looking at our ADP tool on the site, just selected for drafts that started on Monday or later. The main event, the Big Gorilla. The Big Gorilla does tend to have slightly different ADPs. And I don't want to say softer or tighter, but the main event is a little closer to my rankings. Trey McBride is on the 110. So, yeah, we're just not seeing him come back through. Even just that one play. It was the most impressive play in all of preseason, I think. It was bland, but again, every time I think about preseason week 1, I see him separating from his guy as though they're playing 2 different sports. Yeah, Trey McBride is a good pick there. Hopefully we'll have a chance to build some teams, even not having seen all of that stuff a year ago, or not seen it confirmed, right? Colin Kelly and I used a pick in that range on Trey McBride in the first round, and we were able to win. So that was nice. We were able to get Jahmyr Gibbs coming back. So we actually kind of flipped their first and second round ADPs, but got them both. Yeah. I mean, Trey McBride, I talk about having Brock Bowers as the top ranked player in this contest. But the thing that I wrote in the Big Gorilla update that just came out this morning is that not only is the gap between Bowers and McBride not large, it might be negative. It might actually be in Trey McBride's favor.
That's crazy, but that's where we're at with it. I mean, McBride, phenomenal player. I think that's crazy. I think that's crazy because
when I told you this take last night, we then looked at your projections and there was like 1 point between them.
It was very close. The issue is I think McBride's projection is very close to sort of what he is. He matched his targets per route. He matched his efficiency from year 2 to year 3 while adding all the routes because he didn't run a ton of routes in year 2. And it's all very, very strong, but he's a lower ADOT guy, and he's very good. And I'm projecting above average TDs, as I told you, for both of them, even though McBride especially had a low TD rate, but Bowers did too. But I think the reason I think there's a meaningful gap in their value is not on the baseline projection. It's that Brock Bowers could go on to do some things in year 2 that, he didn't do in year 1. And I mean, he did a ton of stuff in year 1, obviously, but he could continue to get even better in a way that is it's there for McBride as well. I'm not trying to act like McBride's not an incredibly talented tight end too, but I think the Kyler Murray thing is a problem for McBride to an extent. I think Marvin Harrison getting force-fed volume and just probably having a better second year, even if it's not great and even if he's not returning value on his ADP, I feel like he's got to do more than he did last year. And so what McBride did last year, I'm not saying it's the ceiling outcome, but I do think there's less meat on the bone for him to have like a meaningfully better year other than on the touchdowns, which, like I said, I'm already kind of projecting. Bowers, man, I just think he could take it up a notch still when you look at all the stuff and the lack of a Marvin Harrison type figure in the passing game and all of those things. But anyway, that's not like exactly a hot take. Yours was the hot take, and I think it was a fun one to ponder. We're almost back up here. Omarion Hampton, Josh Jacobs. At this point, I mean, after last night, Travion Henderson went in the early 4th. I was looking at ADP in mains in the last week. He is going in this range. So is Kenneth Walker. Henderson's been going 403 in the last week. I don't know if he's going to make it back to 405 if you want to get some Travion Henderson.
Yeah, do you have any other? So Higgins is a tiny faller. And if we were going to ever look at him, this might be a spot. No. Okay.
I just don't think I would take him over getting more exposure to Walker or Henderson, or even getting to our other guys, McMillan or who, this is or going elite quarterback with Jaden Daniels. There's so many things I'd rather do here than take T. Higgins.
So Daniels again.
I mean, we can do that, or we can go with a running back. Either way. All right. Travion Henderson is in. That was the move. I like it. We could have done Daniels again. I think you don't want to participate in the Travion rise. I don't think you realize the Travion rise is already it's out of control.
And I'm looking at the last since Monday, right? You mentioned 403, 405. The 405 would get back to us. But I mean, again, how much do you really want to squeeze out? How necessary is that? I was looking, you and I have been enjoying playing Going Deep, the tournament or the format that Mike Clay runs every year that requires like 2 QBs, 3 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 2 tight ends. We obviously started at Brock Bowers at 101 and Trey McBride at 212.
Trey McBride came all the way back. We took Bowers 101 because it's tight end premium and you have to start 2 tight ends. I mean, it goes deep at every position, but tight ends have been a key for us in the past. So, I mean, Bowers, it seemed like at 101, and then McBride came back to 212.
And we have fun with this because we were lucky enough to win in 2017, 2020, and 2024. So it's been going fairly well. But the thing I was looking at from last year is that in the first 6 picks, we selected Breece Hall, Dalton Kincaid, and Stephon Diggs. Those are 3 of our first 6 picks. But the hits on that team were so massive that, I mean, really, we were in just very good position all year long. Now, you can obviously still lose in the playoffs.
We took 3 tight ends pretty high. You still wanted to add Bowers, even though we had 2 tight ends. We added Bowers, and we just didn't play Kincaid. What did we have? Kittle Bowers?
Yeah, Kittle Bowers. So we ended up not playing.
So Kincaid was just a bench player.
He was. Dude. He was. And the reason I mention all of that is that it goes back to this question of how much do we want to squeeze out of TreVeyon Henderson if we think that he is the guy who's just going to score a massive number of points. I mean, in some ways, I've had TreVeyon Henderson ranked at this spot since drafts began, and I've weirdly not gotten quite as much. I haven't banked as much exposure as I would like, but it would be stupid to be like, oh, well, now he's more expensive, let's ignore the best pick. And one of the reasons why I liked going that way is that I felt somewhat confident that either Worthy or McMillan and possibly both would come back, in which case,
that's
again,
what I was thinking.
You can only make 1 pick per round.
I thought we would have a fun time in this round regardless. It looks like both those guys are back here. You're still probably Worthy as priority. I recently moved McMillan over Worthy. I'm very comfortable going Worthy, but I'm curious because you said the other night that after about Ladd goes that you think McMillan might be the next best receiver on the board. Where are you at on those two? I've been back and forth.
Yeah, I mean, I've got Worthy at 29 and McMillan at 33, and I usually just don't mention Worthy in some of those conversations because I don't want them to get too Worthy Rice focused. Especially when you consider the week 14 bye for McMillan, I guess that would be.
And we took McMillan last night as well. Let's take Worthy. That's right. I forgot about the week 14 bye. We just took McMillan, and we had the week 14 bye there on TreVeyon Henderson. So good call on the bye. We talked about it last night's show. FFPC's league championship is in week 14. Money on the line, potentially a booking a trip to the shootout round on the line. You got to be aware of that, and we already have that on Henderson. So Worthy was the right pick there, no question. So we start
I have a fun question for you.
Okay,
if Worthy scores 2 touchdowns, one of them of the deep variety in week 1, where does he go in Saturday drafts?
2 touchdowns?
2 touchdowns.
Well, so, I mean, again, for the listeners who aren't aware what you're asking necessarily, I know a lot are, but it's always good to remind people the FFPC format, they continue to draft right up through Sunday. And so after these first games have occurred, you can pick the players from those teams. And the way that they level the playing field, because this is a massive contest, is we've drafted Worthy. We can choose after we see his score whether we want to put him into our lineup. And the people that are drafting after the fact can choose to select him and play him in their first week 1 starting lineup after they know the score and after they know the game. You're saying he has 2 touchdowns and one of a deep variety. So we're talking at least like 70 to 80 yards. We're talking at least a 20-point game, more like a 25-point game when you add in the catches, the full PPR element, sort of at minimum. And people historically have overpaid for that just to get off to a fast start. But I think it would also, in the case of Worthy, speak so favorably about the upside outcome because he's very specifically someone that people want to know whether or not he can win in certain types of ways. If you saw that, 2 touchdowns in week 1 with Rice on the field, because Rice now is not going to be suspended for the first 4 games, I mean, we were talking about the 16 first round profiles and the 17th maybe being London. Worthy could not go lower than 18. He would have. I mean, that's what I'm thinking in my head immediately. Is does he get in there with like Puka? Does he get in there with Malik Neighbors? Is he going 108 where we took Saquon, or is he going in the second round, in the early second round with Brian Thomas? Maybe with Drake London a little bit later in the second round. There's no question he would rise to at least the middle of the second round. I don't know how. What I'm thinking in my head is would he rise to the middle of the first round? I think it's somewhere between those two spots. A few of the drafts on Friday or Saturday he'd probably go 103 or something like that. I mean, I think you're talking about a scenario where people would get really quickly be like, "Oh, I didn't get enough Xavier Worthy. I am wrong. I didn't get enough Xavier Worthy. I have to make sure to get Xavier Worthy on this team." That's the way that people do tend to respond to those really big scores in the look ahead games. And so, yeah, anyway, that'd be a fascinating outcome. We like to do a couple of those types of drafts every year after those first games are played. It's not that you say it like that. I'm very in favor of us getting our Xavier Worthy shares now because I do think the possibility exists that he gets more expensive, probably more so than I think the possibility exists that he gets less expensive. He had a very good opener last year. Andy Reid's had all.
And you think about some other
stuff up.
Some other Chiefs like Kareem Hunt in his rookie season, where he goes off, and I mean Hunt went then very early, but then paid it off. Somewhat similar to, obviously Saquon went very early on those last drafts and then pretty clearly paid it off.
Yeah,
but Jameson Williams does not make it back to us. What would be the dream scenario? Jameson Williams was going right about our pick, which would have been a lot of fun, I think.
Is Pickens?
We also did. Pickens is gone. He went.
Yeah, no. Has
4-10.
Has he been going in the fourth now? Is what I was going to ask.
502.
502. Okay. So those guys were never really an option. Shawn, I mean, I think Laporta is again an option. I think we took him in the fifth last night, but I do think he's a viable pick again if he makes it to us at 508. He's going about 506. It looks like. Yeah, Jameson would have been nice. A lot of receivers off the board. At this point, I think for me it's Travis Hunter or Jalen Waddle going back down that road, or RJ Harvey. I think we could take, who is still on the board here, like late into the fifth. Him and Travion have been going back to back for so long that we're potentially able to pair them, but in the third and the fifth, 2 full rounds apart. That would be a little bit odd. Calvin Ridley goes, DK Metcalf goes. A really wide receiver heavy draft. It has left Laporta on the board and RJ Harvey 1 pick ahead of us. What's the dream scenario for you?
I think it's Harvey. I think that he's going to score a massive number of points. And, we took a non-receiving back in the first round, and not because he can't do it, just because that's the way the offense works. But, I mean, receptions have completely dried up at the running back position, and yet I think the rookies are going to give us that. Now, how quickly all that develops certainly is a different question. But, man, the Broncos, Ben, you wrote all of this stuff up, but in my quick count, they threw 9 passes to the backs who are in the battle to make the team in preseason week 1.
They threw 9 pack. I actually didn't watch the backs that are battling to make the team for the Broncos. You're talking about like Jaleel.
By that I mean like everybody who you would know the name of.
You mean like Jaleel and Estime and all those guys?
Yeah.
They combined for 9 targets. So you're saying all those dudes were getting targets. Yeah. So this is why I'm still pretty into J.K. Dobbins. And I've been wanting to talk about Dobbins with you again because last night we talked about, you mentioned we might get into a little debate. Then he ended up going, and then we took Charbonnet. And I took him in the Apex Expert League that you and I are doing together. against each other, but we're both in the league. And my thing is, I think that it's basically what you just said, that there's going to be a lot of running back targets. That was a thesis last year. I don't really think there's any reason we should think differently. Their running backs were terrible, and they were still 4th in the league in running back targets. Like, my thesis last year was I felt like the floor was top 5 in running back targets, and then I think we got the floor outcome. And I think we don't do this with data enough, where we don't recognize that what we got was we talk about range of outcomes, talk about ceiling and floor and whatever. Like, we get a 20th percentile outcome. We need to be able to recognize this was a 20th percentile outcome. I think that was clearly the case with Sean Payton's running back targets last year. And he was like, screw that. The guy that I threw 70 passes to, which was Javonte Williams, isn't good. I'm going to let him go, and I'm going to bring in 2 running backs that I actually like. Dobbins obviously did not play a lot, and Harvey played a ton. And I'm way bullish on Harvey right now as well. I really like that pick. But Dobbins as well, I think they can coexist. I think there's going to be a lot of balls to the running backs for all the reasons that we said. Bo Nix did this at college. He understands the kind of success rate element to playing quarterback. The reason Peyton wanted him so much is because of that. The reason the fit was so good is because that's what Sean Payton likes out of his passing game, that sort of success rate element, complete short passes, catch and run, keep, in front of the sticks. And it's what the modern NFL asks you to do in the passing game. They did it with Marvin Mims really well late in the year after the running backs couldn't do it. Mims had a bunch of plays out of the backfield. And I definitely think that's going to come back this year, running back targets in Denver. So the fact that you're saying like a lot of different guys got a lot of different targets is a meaningful thing. It's something we both harped on a lot last year. We probably haven't dug into the trends as much this year because we were like, this is going to be a lot. You and I both wrote separate, write-ups about what the receiving looked like. And it's massive. I mean, Sean Payton's whole career, it's always massive. The running back target share and running back targets are always near the top of the league. But my big argument last year was they could gap the league. They could be way ahead of every other team. They finished like 4th in the league. I think this is the year where you might see that residual post-hype outcome where they do gap the league, or there's a lot more than last year at least. And Harvey and Dobbins are both able to catch, 40-plus balls. Maybe Harvey catches 60 plus, and you're talking about 100 combined. Like, it's going to be fruitful in PPR leagues for these guys.
It is. And you mentioned J.K. Dobbins. I've said a couple times on the show, one of the reasons that I had him ranked so far ahead of ADP before he signed with the Broncos is that SIS had him as, more or less the 3rd, 4th, 5th best, depending on, exactly which stats you're going to prioritize. But against heavy boxes, which his ability in the short area is still at the top of the NFL, even though the ability to create the big play or to finish the long runs is probably gone for good. I just think that Harvey's going to give you those long runs and just becomes such a breakout, just monster potentially is real. So, Ben, we had 2 guys I really wanted there with 2 picks to go. They both do get selected, Travis Hunter, TJ Hawkinson.
Yep, that's what I was looking at too.
Really have a pick I want to make now.
I think it's Jalen Waddle, Sean. I think we have to go back down. If we're doing Saquon Barkley, I think we got to go back down the Jalen Waddle tunnel. I mean, Tyreek Hill's having a really bad August, and camp reports are, unlike the past several seasons, Waddle's sort of the number 1 this year. He's the guy there. Is he you seeing some other pick? Okay, you selected him there. This is a little bit behind ADP for him. We get about a 5-pick slide. Hunter was also behind ADP, and Hawkinson was right at ADP, and I had both of them in my mind. But in the 3 picks leading up, I was thinking Hunter and Hawkinson just like you were, but I was thinking Waddle as well. So I kind of had a 3 group. Those 2 went. That was tough, but you went ahead and took
I'm
Waddle
glad
there,
that
so
Jalen Waddle is
like
having a good camp.
but
I've watched him play football. It's a problem.
Come on. His rookie year, he caught 106 balls. The stuff that I wrote and was talking about with the Dolphins last night when we were talking a little Ollie Gordon, I think, right? I can't remember. I did a pod yesterday morning with Scott Barrett and Theo Greminger on the Fantasy Points network, and I did a pod this morning with Dwayne McFarland on the Fantasy Life network. They're both awesome, really fun conversations. They're both about 2 hours long. And we did one main last night that was, 2-hour main event stream. I can't remember where all the different conversations were, but I'm pretty sure we talked through my little Miami take on the stream last night, where the fact that Tua isn't going to scramble, and the scramble rates were way down and the design rates were way down. They're not going to use him on a tush push. He's not going to be any kind of a threat to touchdown equity. They're going to throw in the red zone and everything's going to concentrate. He's the type of quarterback where you get a lot of skill position volume and then they concentrate things there. And so, I mean, Waddle had 100+ catches with Tua as a rookie before Tyreek Hill came over there. I've seen him play football before too. It's been rough these last few years, but if they're talking about him as being a little bit more motivated and a little bit back to that guy we saw those first couple years, because the last couple haven't been quite as good. I mean, he could be a 100-catch guy.
So I think you have to give people credit for this, right? It's easy to make fun, especially from your couch. He's talked about like how bad his hands actually are, and that he's worked on that and has gone through different drills. He's gone through, actually don't remember the specifics, right? But he's broken that down and tried to work through how you become a little better at the catch point, which, I mean, I think you have to be skeptical because there's just so much innate ability that comes in. You've got hand size, you just got the ability to process. You got I mean, some people are better at catching things than others, and that's even true of
I
NFL
didn't know
receivers.
he acknowledged this. I don't want him on our team anymore. If he's aware that he sucks at catching the football, it's not great.
No, I mean, he's going to be better. I mean, he's on the team now. Once the dam breaks, I'm going to be all Jalen Waddle all the time. So this draft is.
You just shattered all my dreams by telling me that he thinks he sucks at football. Like, we thought he sucks.
He knows he's not great at catching. So the other thing,
it was easier when it was just us.
I just had a bunch of dodgeball quotes that flashed through my mind there.
If you can catch a wrench, you can catch a ball.
You can catch a ball. So the other thing is just if he could practice staying healthy. I mean, we're talking about things that are tough to control. But yeah,
Jalen Waddle's got some old guy throwing wrenches at him this offseason so he can learn how to catch.
Almost certainly. He's going to come out, have 100% catch rate. I mean, lead the NFL in receptions. We got this dude who, I mean, the comparison to his teammate makes it tough, right? If we're talking about one of the 10 fastest players in the NFL, things could break very nicely here. One of the reasons that I'm out on Jalen Waddle is just the other thing that you've been talking about, which I think that if we lose Tyreek Hill, you're going to have so many Malik Washington receptions that just playing Malik Washington in the last round is a pretty clear-cut way to go about that.
Yes, that's going to be a lot of fun. He's such a fun riser after that preseason game and the stuff that he did late last year. I think we talked about him last night as well when we were talking about the late round receivers. The reason I got so excited about your late round receiver piece is I had just written about it earlier this week. Yes, that guy didn't take Mahomes. This guy's already taken Baker. We have Worthy. I don't know if you want to go Mahomes, but this is a great value. Is it not? Oh, no, it's actually close to his ADP, but Baker Mayfield went last round. And so I was kind of like, maybe Mahomes would fall to us here. I guess.
Well, Ben, the reporting today was that Baker was so good in the joint practices that he's not going to play in preseason week 2. Baker Mayfield on fire. Every time that I hear about how good Baker Mayfield is, I think about how good Bryce Young is prepared to be as another former number 1 overall pick who was a little bit smaller, took a little bit of time, but now seems awesome. So Aaron Jones goes right there.
If you like small former number 1 overall picks, can I interest you in Kyler Murray? Sorry.
No, I mean, please no. Yeah, I mean, this is Patrick Mahomes, right?
It's Mahomes, it's maybe Njoku, and it's maybe just take Addison, but I think Addison has the best potential to come back.
He's got the chance to come back in this draft. I think we need to let him potentially come back. The other pick,
then let's push tight end.
Golden. The other pick would be Matthew
Golden. I mean, I'm open to it if you'd rather just take another receiver here and push quarterback further, but I like the Mahomes path too. I like either path.
So I did the
Mahomes.
I don't know, 10,000. No, it's actually like 12 or 13,000 words on the Kansas City Chiefs. One of the things that comes out of that is I do think that Mahomes has this chance to bounce back. Now, the weirdness of having Rashee Rice suspended in season, I think you can't love. The fact that we're getting all kinds of weirdness out of Kansas City about Brashard Smith, who has dominated camp and yet
It's going to get
somehow
cut.
does seem like he's on the verge of getting cut.
Yeah.
That's not good. In part because Brashard Smith actually is a huge part of the pro Patrick Mahomes thesis, because you're going to get more of the passing touchdowns down at the 1, 2, 3 yard line. When he blew up the last time, and it was just, his entire career up until the last couple seasons, those short touchdowns to gadget guys like Jarrett McKinnon were a huge part of that. So I don't know that we're in the best timeline right now for Patrick Mahomes to jump back to like a 4,545 touchdown season, or certainly a 5,050 season. But it's on these teams that have Xavier Worthy where I think it makes sense to look at that in concert and say that could be a path to winning the $1 million, in addition to just being a good play in a vacuum.
I like it. The picks after it are Montgomery, Ingram, and Njoku. Addison, Golden still there. The Ingram and Njoku picks do put a little bit of stress on us at tight end. I don't think Tucker Kraft or Colston Loveland, they both have later 8th round ADPs, would come back. Jake Ferguson and Dalton Kincaid also expected to go before we pick again in the 9th round. So then you're thinking about, this could be the Kyle Pitts team. I'm starting to get a little bit vaguely. We already did. Look, we did Saquon, Barkley, and Jalen Waddle. So we're building weird here. We're picking guys that we haven't usually picked. Might as well have a Kyle Pitts home run swing on this team. No, I think, and so Mixon goes there. I think, the tight end question is intriguing, but it would be really hard to pass on Addison as our 4th receiver. I think I could pass on Golden, but he would be even a little bit more of an ADP value. How are you thinking about our needs right here with Saquon, London, Travion Henderson, Xavier Worthy, RJ Harvey, Jalen Waddle, 3 running back, 3 receivers start with Mahomes now in the 7th?
I think that we need more receivers, or that I would feel comfortable if we got that receiver upside. I don't know that those names move the needle for me enough to come off of picks that I just objectively like better. We did the 9 running backs last night in the pure 0 RB build. That was so much fun. It's always possible that this will be like the 4 or 5 tight end build at the end today. Not because we're going to necessarily streaming tight ends or keeping all of those, but that there might be a value to watching all of the potential breakout players play for the first month to see who that Jonnu Smith is going to be for this season, if there is one, and if you can find out early. One of the things that happened with Smith, obviously, is that you could have easily drafted him and cut him before the actual breakout happened. I'm certainly not wedded to that, but just thinking forward to what might be available at the end. Harold Fannin was not drafted in our draft last night.
I like it. I like that idea of being a little more aggressive late. Deebo Samuel, Jalen Warren, 2 off the board. So we are, and J.K. Dobbins goes. So we will have access to either Addison or Golden. Golden's got the higher ADP. There is, I like the idea of pushing tight end. I didn't think we needed to go with those guys, but they were, in my mind, they are in some ways the last of like an upside group. And then Brian Robinson here. So only 1 receiver goes on the turn after we take Mahomes. Receiver clearly the thing that's pushing down. Like Adunze is behind ADP. Jawan Jennings is behind ADP. Matthew Golden is well behind ADP. This is a spot where there's several names there. Addison is right at ADP. He's the guy I like the most. I have him a small tier break above all those other ones. Obviously, I know you love Jordan Addison as well. But if you do want to get exposure to Golden or one of these other guys, I mean, I'm fine with that as well.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the question of how much Addison do you want? We could end up getting just a ton, and then you have
Let's
a
try
bunch of
Golden.
teams that could potentially start slow. You
Yeah.
think Golden here?
I'm okay with it. Yeah, he's the next guy on my list right after that small tier break I referenced. And we do have a lot of exposure to
But
Addison. So
I'm gonna make that. Is it okay to go Addison here?
yes, it's totally okay to go Addison. You said how much Addison do we want? I thought you were wanting to go away from it, but I would prefer Addison. I went on
I panicked at the
the
last second, just thinking like how massive the gap between those two receivers probably is.
yeah, exactly. I went on Dwayne's show this morning, and the first question he asked me was who's the most undervalued wide receiver in fantasy, and I thought about it for a minute, and I landed on Addison. Just going through the whole profile and talking with Dwayne, who's a really sharp analyst, and getting his takes on Addison as well. I'm just very pro Addison at this moment in my off season. Like I had a really good conversation about Jordan Addison today. So, I mean, and obviously you've been integral in helping me understand that. Frankly, you've been really, really high on Addison from the beginning. But you talk about the age adjusted production stuff. You talk about the fact that this is a guy who was a 3-year early declare, then young at 21 in the pros, 10 touchdowns as a rookie, 22, 10 touchdowns again, and 9 receiving. I think he had 1 rushing. He's going into his age 23 season. We see that first preseason game. He catches 3 balls in the first 3 throws from JJ McCarthy. To me, fully confirmed on 3 plays that if Justin Jefferson does get hurt, Addison's going to be your alpha, man. Like that was the contingent upside case that you don't have to pay for. He's T. Higgins and he's George Pickens, but he's going in the 8th round. I mean, yes, he has a suspension looming over his head, but he's also young and developing and may have a higher ceiling as a player than both T. Higgins and George Pickens because he was a Blitnikoff winner at 19 in college and then transferred and then was really good at another school and then went to the pros and was really good 2 years in a row with different quarterbacks, scoring all these touchdowns. And I mean, and people are looking at like the per route stuff and saying, oh, the yards per route run's not that impressive. And it is for his age and for playing with Justin Jefferson. You're just not controlling.
Right.
Yeah. You're not controlling for the other variables.
People don't realize how fast he is either. And when you're thinking about playing off of Jefferson, when you're thinking about the vertical ability, when you're thinking about the touchdowns, in the big gorilla write-up that I mentioned that when we're thinking about comparing and contrasting these suspension receivers, because the only real question with Rice is how much, right? I talked about Addison's profile, how much more dynamic it is and how much more multifaceted it is. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's a better player than Rice, although he probably is. And then that doesn't mean that he's a better fantasy option than Rice, and he's probably not. But a big difference in price when we're trying to put together these teams.
That is right. So we have Golden Ghost, Kraft goes, Jawan Jennings. These guys start coming off around the turn. Jaden Higgins went a little bit ahead of ADP there. At receiver, like on my list, we're down to sort of Josh Downs, Jaden Reed, Luther Bird, and Michael Pittman. And then you're into like Brandon Ayuk and the rest of the names. At running back, Cam Scattaboo, Jaden Blue, some of the names remaining for me. I would ask you if you would be intrigued by Colston, Love, and Lind at this point. I don't want to necessarily assume that he's going to come all the way back. He probably will not. And then he goes 2 picks later, so we'll just not worry about that. What are you thinking?
He's the type of player that I'm thinking wide range of outcomes on the tight ends as we get through that. And
get a good
we're going to get somebody who scores for us as we work through the season. The Dalton Kincaid thing too, I don't have a ton of optimism there. At the same time, the Bills, if they had someone emerge who was a dynamic playmaker, there would be a lot of work and a lot of touchdowns in that offense, even though they want it to be spread.
So you're starting to tuck yourself into the Dalton Kincaid upside case again. I got sent some stuff that was like he was more, jacked up than we realized last year. He had these multiple knee injuries and stuff, and then he, like the next day, left practice, or maybe it was left the preseason game with like knee soreness. And I'm like, all right, cool. Well, he was so jacked up last year that he couldn't play, and he's also missing camp time with the knee issues. I think he's a lot healthier. He had one catch in the preseason game, and he looked spry. I wrote that in my preseason stealing signals that on Kincaid's one catch, he looked good after the catch. It was a little like 5-yard catch. He got like 5 more yards and got like a 10-yard gain. And the 5 yards of after the catch is like, hey, this is a tight end with some movement skills. I mean, it wasn't a massive play or anything is my point, and it was a sample of one, literally. But I could be convinced of Dalton Kincaid. I don't know that he was damaging to a lot of rosters last year. He's one of the ones that I hold a grudge against.
Yeah. So that he didn't live up to ADP, you could understand that type of thing happens all the time, even to pretty good players. That he wasn't startable, that he wasn't usable, that you couldn't play him at all. That was shocking because, again, he actually did come in with a pretty cool profile, which is part of the reason he was going that early in an offense where they needed a playmaker. None of that happened, Ben. Fun things have happened here, and that we could take Jaden Reed if we wanted. I do think that with Scatterboo and Blue going, that it's probably not a running back selection.
I think we should just get more Reed. This is a team where we took 3 running backs in the first 5 rounds. It's a great opportunity to take Jaden Reed. Jalen Waddle could be nothing for all we know. We're obviously very committed to Xavier Worthy and Patrick Mahomes, and London is a big piece here. And Addison's going to be suspended, but maybe that doesn't really pair with Reed well if Reed's hurt early in the year. But some of the other stuff doesn't fit perfectly, but I think you just want to tack on really good football players when you can get them at good prices. Jaden Reed at 908 we've jumped the shark.
Yeah, it's a great price there for what he'll eventually be. Again, barring a darkest timeline outcome, which is much more possible now than it was a week and a half ago. But we have this team set up in such a way where we're able to get a lot of running back firepower for the full season, for the sprint at the end. And yet with the first 6 picks, we do have the 2 running back, the 2 wide receiver, the 2 flexes all accounted for. That does give you some freedom to draft players like Jordan Addison and Jaden Reed. I don't think that you want to go out there and stack your team with a whole bunch of guys who are not going to play early. But whether or not you need those very early picks, again, I just think it's a contrast with the Rashee Rice selection, where you're going to be missing one of the players in that starting range for a number of key games. And
when we looked back on some of the builds last year, that we had a lot of teams that did very well, and we did a little looking back on them toward the end of the year, and it was the wide receivers in this range. It was the Addison was a big one, Jamison Williams picks, and whoever the third one is, I'm forgetting, that we were taking on every team in this 8-9 range that really made these builds work and lengthen these builds. And when you start in the first 6 rounds, like you said, 3 firepower running back options. And I love that we paired Travion Henderson and RJ Harvey. We didn't get a chance to talk about this with Saquon, because Saquon's going to be the ultimate fast start guy. There is a little bit of concern, wear and tear. Always had a lot of stuff, whatever. I mean, it's kind of fascinating that this team, I think, is built in a way that it could compete for the overall main event if Saquon Barkley was lost for the year in like week 10, because I think he would help us get there. And then if you have Travion and RJ Harvey as your running backs late, you still have London, Worthy, Waddle, Addison, and Reed at receiver. That's a good enough starting lineup without your first round pick. And it's one of those things we talk about when we build teams. We're trying to build contingent scenarios and those things. I think we've built an incredible amount of depth. The fact that we also took Mahomes in 7 and only got 3 receivers through the first 7 rounds without a tight end. Because sometimes when we get 3 receivers in the first 7 rounds, we've taken an early tight end or 2. And so that's helping your flex and it's solving other problems. To be able to come back with Addison in 8 and Jaden Reed in 9, I'm not positive that we're going to get those things right. Addison has a suspension. Reed is hurt. Like you said, the darkest timeline stuff is more plausible today on Reed than it was, a week ago. those types of talents. Reed's a guy 2+ yards per out run first 2 years. It's an incredible cohort that he joins in doing that. I know he's never going to run around in a 2 wide receiver set. I get it, but you get those kinds of talents in a build like this where you only got 3 receivers in the first 7. You just sort of shouldn't be able to. The pick after Reed was Cooper Kupp, unfortunately probably washed up. Josh Downs after that's, I think, a reasonable pick. And then Khalil Shakir, the pick after that.
Who's today?
Downs got hurt today. That's right. I did see that, and I hadn't internalized it yet. And then Khalil Shakir is hurt with an ankle sprain and needs a quick yak player that I think it's probably not great that he has a leg injury for how he scores. You're talking about Reed going in that range. I just think that's crazy. It comes back around to us. Well, I mean, your guy Luther Burden's still here too, so we can continue to add wide receiver firepower. But if you want to go Kincaid did not go. Pitts and Ferguson go at the turn. We are running low on meaningful tight end options. This is the time to take Kincaid if you want to take him. He's going in the 905. We're at the 1005. You want to take Burden?
It's not very appealing, is it? Well, Bashal Tutin is going earlier than Burden, and Burden might even come back around. We had the report today that he's being boxed out by Olamide Zaccheaus. So,
I'm comfortable with Tutin. I don't think we have to take him on this build where we got the 3 early ones, but we can keep adding running backs for sure. Tutin's the fun pick. I'm very into it. He looked better than the other guys. If you want to keep adding the running backs, we grabbed Tutin there. I'm obviously sure you're always thinking through the structural stuff, but I did just want to throw that note in there that I think, we're not running back needy in this stage, but it's also nice to add more running back firepower at this stage.
And his ceiling is just so monstrous that if we have a chance for Burden to come back, I think we want to do that. There's also a chance that in some of these drafts, if someone starts to fall, it spooks everybody and they continue to fall. Maybe we would get Kincaid even another round later. In thinking through, especially that first weekend game, now we're going to need tight end scoring for the full season, but Dallas Goedert is kind of interesting if Burden doesn't come back. And I know that Goedert has been someone that you have. Now, again, Goedert probably shouldn't come back, but if he would be an interesting name.
But it's fine if we wind up with, like, you mentioned like in Chigakonkwo the other day, and I liked hearing that because I'm pretty into it. If we had like a Chig, Jatavian Sanders, Harold Fannin, that's at least 3 of the 4. Like, I don't know who the 4th tight end is, but if we wound up with something like that in this room, I'm totally fine with that.
So Dalton Kincaid does go there. The other name that I think is
I love that you're like, he fell a full round, but he's gonna fall another round plus to us. Is my
you never know. You never know. Isaiah Likely is a guy who probably isn't going to score well in the first month with that injury, but Ben, doesn't he have massive upside for the second half of the season? Like, no. Nobody does in Baltimore.
Exactly. That's the problem, right? I don't know. I never really saw the vision with him. You were kind of into him a little bit before the injury on something we drafted together, and I was sort of questioning it. And then as soon as he got hurt, I was like, I just don't want anything to do with it. I don't want to wait for a guy that I actually don't think is probably going to do that much. But maybe I'm the one lacking the imagination there. He's a good player. Well, really efficient.
You think about that game to start the season last year against Kansas City, and they got away from that. And you hear the coaches talking in the offseason, and you're like, that's what they envision for him. And you combine that with what sounded like skepticism about Mark Andrews in the offseason. And I guess I just thought that maybe Likely should go ahead of Andrews straight up before the injury. Obviously, that wouldn't be the case now. And Mark Andrews is probably undervalued now. Now, again, it's kind of a thing with Likely where if we were sure that he was going to come back right and be right more or less immediately, then it would be a little bit different.
Burden goes here to the guy who took Pickens, took Jameson Williams a little earlier than we wanted, took both Tucker Kraft and Colston Loveland earlier, Omarion Hampton at 303. This is a certain type of drafter, shall we say, one that makes selections similar to our own. Who were you just talking about? Why am I blanking already? What? Oh, you were just talking about a tight end. I'm going to figure it out. Let me figure it out. Isaiah Likely is who you're talking about. Mark Andrews, I wanted to add, is going to get tush pushes this year. They said that this offseason. I don't think we can forget that. This idea that you should rank Likely ahead of Andrews. I actually think in tight end premium is a little trickier, but the Andrews touchdown stuff. So since Todd Monken took over, Andrews had massive touchdown rate last year, and it's easy to be like, it's got to regress. But so did Likely. On a per target rate, he was over 10%. Andrews was like 13%. These are huge numbers. Tight end average is like 5.5% ish, which is higher than the receiver average, which is more like in the fours. It's like 5 to 5.5, I believe, with the tight ends. Sometimes you'll see the ancillary tight ends that don't run a ton of routes and are only really used in the red zone jump to 6-7%. But to be at 13, there's some that get to 8. 13% for Andrews, 10+% for Likely is massive. And I bring it up because the year prior, Likely was also at 10+% in Monken's first year. And I think Andrews was at like 9.5. So they've essentially been in double digits, both of them, both years. I think Andrews in the first year was slightly below 10. But they're massive touchdown rates per target. And you're like, oh, it's a small sample. Well, the reason I'm sharing that it's for both of them is if you combine the tight end the tight end touchdown rate in this offense under Todd Monken over 2 years now, the sample is starting to get really big and the touchdowns are going to be there. So I'm somewhat into Likely from that perspective, but it's another reason I think you can still somewhat be into Andrews. And then you add some little tush push elements. Like Andrews can score a lot of touchdowns this season if he runs for 3 or 4 as well, which they've said they're going to do. They didn't start doing the tush push until about week 14. And then down the stretch, they did 4 times the rest of the regular season and 4 times in the postseason in a total of like 8 games. And he had like 8 carries. So if he's getting 15 tush pushes throughout the year, now most of them were in the field of play, less than right at the goal line. I think at the goal line, they still like to hammer Derrick Henry. But if they do a few of them at the goal line over the course of the season, and Andrews gets 3 rushing touchdowns, and he catches a high rate of them again, that's how he gets there. I'm not really necessarily arguing against Likely either, though. Maybe I'm making you feel more excited about Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, I'm thinking if we're looking at players who could help win the tournament from lower ADPs, this sounds like
the guys
exactly
that score a lot. You're like, oh, you're saying he's going to score a ton of touchdowns? That's what I want.
It's part of the thesis that I'm always trying to get you to buy in on Rashad Bateman. I'm like, what if Bateman draws a few more targets? Then he's just going to crush everything.
I just can Lamar really have another 19% passing TD rate or whatever it is? It's not 19%, but it's like quarterbacks definitely shouldn't be around 10%, and yet he's pushing 8. I think he's 8.5% or something last year. It's crazy.
Well, defenses are going to have to account for Derrick Henry and Keaton Mitchell, so it's going to be tough to stop everything. And again, it doesn't actually have to be that for the full season. You need some things to go right to win the sprint. It could be for those 3 weeks.
There's been some weird tight end picks in this draft. This drafter took Kelsey ahead of Laporta and Hawkinson earlier. He just took Hunter Henry here. Goedert did make it back. And Likely still on the board. I don't know if this is where's his cost at?
It's much lower. This would be, this is more than a round discount on Goedert. And I think it would still be pairing him, obviously, with other tight ends, but I don't see another pick.
No, let's take him. Let's pair him with other tight ends. He's the start of our 4 tight end build, but we get to do it in a friendly. Yeah, I don't see another pick either. We're at the end of my big tier break at receiver. The wide receiver window has closed. The last receivers that went were, Burden did go. Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Ayuk, and Keon Coleman all went. You're probably talking at this point like Kyle Williams, I think maybe I've got Wan'Dale Robinson way up there now, so he would be, I mean, that's where we're at that position. At running back, I have not checked off Ramondre Stevenson, and I don't see him, so I guess he would be one of the top ones, but we have Travion. We're not taking him. Tyler Algier, Nick Chubb, some of those dudes. Javonte Williams just went after our pick. So really there wasn't a lot there. Goddard for me was the last of a tier at tight end. At quarterback, there's some sliding value as well. There's 9 QBs, so Nix and Kyler and Baker did go, but we're at the end of the 11th now, and we haven't even got that QB 10, which is usually, Justin Fields, Dak sometimes. Those guys, Dak goes in the 10th, Fields goes in the 11th, Drake May goes early 12th as the 12th QB. We haven't got the 10th QB yet as we get to the end of the 11th. This would have been a draft that, had we not gone Mahomes, might have played out favorably for pushing the quarterback position. But the big thing about that trend, and Dak does go here towards the end of the 11th, you're seeing the quarterbacks fall because the running backs and the receivers are going in this room, which is fine. We took a lot of them early. It's actually playing into our hands a little bit. Get a nice price on Goddard. That was the pick there in terms of what was available to us. Now the question is, what do we do coming back?
Because it's barren.
It is very dry. There's not. I mean, I think you just start pulling up tight ends you like. Likely doesn't go until I have Okonkwo as the next. He doesn't go until the 15th. Likely doesn't go to the 13th, but likely does go early 13, and we're picking 1205, and we would need to get him 5 picks behind ADP if we didn't take him here in the 12th. We would need, a little bit of a slide. We'd be pulling him up 8 or 9 picks to get him to the spot we're taking him, but trying to send him, one of those things where when you try to send a player around the long side of the board and he's going in that round coming back, you got to kind of debate whether you think he's going to fall past ADP or you're willing to take him quite a bit ahead of ADP to make sure you get him, because this is the last time before ADP you're actually going to have a selection. In a spot, Sean, where we're talking about it being particularly flat and we want to build out tight end with multiple swings, and you kind of want to stash likely, we already got Goddard as kind of the floor play. It seems pretty straightforward.
And I just want to point out a hilarious thing that is currently happening, which is that Brandon Aubrey has around 13 ADP. And the reason I bring that up is because it makes the Cam Little pick look so good from last night.
I knew that was going to Cam Little as soon as you said Aubrey. I was like, how are we tying this back into last night? If you didn't tie it in, I was going to have to find a way to. That was fantastic. What are you thinking? Did you like my little case for there's no other pick? We might as well take Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. I do think there's...
You don't like to take hurt guys ahead of ADP because they can slide. I get it.
Right. And at some point, if we take both, Likely in some ways was maybe more interesting if we didn't have Goddard. If we take both Likely and Okonkwo, and Okonkwo might be the better play, then we're starting to block ourselves off of some of these backs. But frankly, the backs aren't that strong in 12 and 13. I'm kind of thinking that if we take the 2 tight ends, then you end up maybe not needing both Sanders and Fannin. And I think drafting both of those guys is pretty fun. So kind of thinking some of the things in the future.
Let's do that. That's fine. We already got Goddard, so we don't need to take Likely. You'd rather pull up a running back, or I don't even know if it's pulling one up, but find one of these upside backs. Who's the back that you want to go to?
I mean, it would probably be Krosky Merritt again, which I don't necessarily think that's, that we need to do that. So it really is any direction here.
It's him or Keaton Mitchell, Keaton Mitchell's ADP is quite a bit lower still. I don't know. I'm open to either. I think I would do likely. Okay, you took Krosky Merritt right as I said that. We were down to like 7 seconds. No, I hear what you're saying about, like, I was just thinking that a couple weird tight end picks in this draft. Maybe if like our targets at tight end go, if Okonkwo goes, or somebody takes Sanders early or something, you can't always count on the guys you want to be there. But I'm totally fine with Krosky Merritt. He's a fine upside swing there. I do think it's maybe a little bit overhyped at this point, don't you?
At the same time, you think about Keaton Mitchell versus JCM there. And one of the things with Bucky Irving that was so important, and one of the things with Tyrone Tracy that was so important, was that they could win the jobs without the starter getting hurt. And I mean, I don't think that that's super likely in this case. I don't want to make it sound like, he's on the verge of winning the job. It's going to take, a month and a half of the regular season for that to be very realistic. And a lot of things will happen between now and then. But if you won the job without the other guys actually going down in an offense where Jaden Daniels is leading you to multiple full games where you don't even have to punt, then it ends up being pretty potent.
Yeah, he has an explosiveness. He has some nice peripherals, missed tackles forced, evasion numbers, some things to like about him. I'm probably just anchoring a little bit to the preseason action, which was a small sample, and feeling like I had really high expectations with all the camp buzz that I was going to see. What we saw with Keaton Mitchell, where all the camp buzz immediately showed up in the preseason. This guy is just looking like he's from a different planet. Didn't really look that way with Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, and yet that doesn't mean much of anything. It was like 7 carries, and what we're hearing from camp is very, very relevant. I guess, it's one of those situations as well that I pair a couple things. It's kind of similar to the Bigsby thing where I was like, part of the reason ETN's not playing is he's a veteran, he's hurt, this and that. Krosky Merritt's looking great right now. Eckler's probably not getting a lot of reps because he's this older back, but Eckler is gym rat, total locker room guy, super, super positive human being. People love him. They loved him on the team last year and still had some explosiveness last year, Shawn. He actually brought some of his, like, a breakaway rush percentage actually rebounded, brought some explosiveness back that once he got a little bit of space, because Jaden Daniels created some space with his legs and the threat that he was. Eckler did a good job running to daylight. They also had him returning kicks, and he did a good job on that. He had one of the best kick return averages in the league. Had a little bit more burst back in his first year in Washington after his last year with the Chargers was one where he was a little bit banged up. Just the 2 years prior to that, he led the NFL in touchdowns both the years prior. So 3 and 4 years ago. That's a while back. That's a lot of years in running back years, obviously. But I was going into last year, I was saying maybe he has a chance to rebound because he just had the one down year. It's a lot like ETN this year. He just had the one down year, and both the years prior to that were really good. And in Eckler's case, you're like, this guy works out like crazy, total gym rat, takes care of his body, etc. I thought he had some of the burst back last year. I have a really hard time with Krosky Merritt. I like the way that you said it with the month to a month and a half. I think there's people that think he's going to like have a big role in week 1. But a really hard time with him having a big role immediately because I do think Eckler is going to get that deference. I do think Brian Robinson's still going to have a role. If I had to guess, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt's week 1 line, it's like 5 snaps and 2 carries or 3 carries. I mean, he's playing a little bit behind those 2 guys. Now, that doesn't mean that couldn't change quickly, but that's the worry, I guess.
And while you were saying that, I was thinking through some of the other Commanders options, in part because Zach Ertz is still available and is now way below ADP. He doesn't interest me, and it probably doesn't make sense to burn a draft pick on Ben Sinnott, but I do think that we have a very realistic chance of him having a second half of the season breakout as well. It's very low possibility of him doing exactly what Trey McBride did, but it's set up pretty similarly.
Well, that's fun to hear. I think I got asked about that specific thing. Obviously, you can pattern match it really easily because it was Ertz in a Cliff Kingsbury offense 2 years ago in Arizona. Why couldn't Senate be this year's Trey McBride from 2023? The biggest reason is he didn't play like at all last year, and they had him playing like the move tight end, like a little bit different, like an H-back role. And then they re-signed John Bates, who played a lot more than Senate last year. They were like, yeah, this is our good tight end too. We don't even know about the other player that we drafted in the second round. We don't even know he's on our roster. They drafted him in the second round and didn't play him. And there goes Chico Okonkwo. That was the pick I was worried about. Well ahead of ADP, 2 rounds ahead of ADP, we get Okonkwo getting pulled way up. That's a bummer. That random, tight end somebody really wanted. He goes. Zach Ertz goes off one pick behind him. I thought you were going to say you were open to Zach Ertz because I would have told you that that's probably the grossest player that I actually think is draftable.
Well, we do come back, and Likely is here. And
got to make the pick. You nailed it.
Let's get this one done.
Chig goes. You said we didn't really want to get both Likely and Chig. Likely's ADP 2 rounds higher. Chig goes, but Likely falls. Now, I like Chig quite a bit more than Likely, so I would have liked that to have been flipped. But, you take what you can get. You wanted Likely in this draft.
Is that 40-point tight end premium game from Likely during the sprint. So,
which you wanted him, you got him. The room said this was the Isaiah Likely draft for us.
So Ben, I wanted to ask you about some of those QBs that fell. One of the things that I didn't really want to do last year because it's a difficult use of resources, but there were some drafts where we wanted some CJ Stroud. He fell and took CJ Stroud. I think it was specifically the draft that I did with my sister, and I mentioned that because she just wins every league that she participates in. I don't know how it's possible. But then we eventually took Jaden Daniels because you can't pass Jaden Daniels when he's there at a good value. Obviously, the fact that we took a second QB and the passing-oriented QB busted, and then you get this magical season. There's not a similar Daniels play, but if there were a QB that you really liked that fell to us here as people push the QBs down, is there any part of you that's thinking, if Patrick Mahomes does what he's done the last 2 years and isn't even that playable, that we should have, an emergency shoot to say, look, maybe we could win on somebody else?
There's totally parts of me that say that. I love that you guys, I don't remember this story. We talked a lot about your team with your sister last year. I don't remember the Stroud plus Daniels element. I must have known it last year, but because I knew where you were going with that with the 2 QBs, but I didn't realize 2 QBs that high. I mean, Daniels was still, even if he fell a little bit, he was a 12th round pick or something, and Stroud was a single digit round pick. You probably took him in the 7th round or something. It's a lot of QB draft capital, and on draft day, people would say you're not going to win. Your team's not going to do well enough. It's too much on the quarterbacks. We will circle back to this because we are back up. Do you want to just pull Jatavian Sanders up? Do you want to go? What are you thinking?
I think he's going to last for us.
Do you want to take a QB? I don't have a name.
There just isn't a clear-cut pick again at this point, which is fine. Drafters are doing a nice job in the main event, which they should be doing.
That's why I wanted to pull up another tight end, because it's just like accomplishing, and we can take anything later than this, though. There are a lot of running backs and receivers that we like later, actually. Because the tight ends have been going weird. You grabbed Jatavian there. I think it's smart. I think the plan was to really, and the QB to answer the question would be Bryce Young. I mean, he looked really good in the first game. You've really liked him. He might come back around. We might have a little Bryce Jatavian stack. We did take Jatavian for the record. Herbert and Goff go right behind it. That's where we're at with QB. JJ McCarthy, Trevor Lawrence went on the last turn. The turn before, you mentioned this. because those guys went before our likely pick. Drake May, Brock Purdy, Justin Fields, Caleb Williams all went off between our Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt and Isaiah likely picks. And so we're, kind of talking about this quarterback element. I love that you did something. The point that I want to harp on what you just described is you did something that most people, casual people, definitely, if they just saw that draft, would say these guys don't know what they're doing. Most analysts would rush at, get like pushed to get out of the way to criticize that decision to take a second quarterback. And yet you're talking about like they're looking at it from like a 101 level of like, you can't do this. And you're talking about sort of circling back to what is feels like or looks like it's a 101 flub, but it's a 301 or 401 or 501 level, maybe sly like a fox play very intentionally. And people will say, well, why would you do that? Why would you take the sliding value on team? Well, part of the case is the portfolio aspect and understanding the players that can be the league winners and wanting to get exposure to them at good prices. And you can't know when you take CJ Stroud at a good price that Jaden Daniels is going to be available at an incredibly good price in that same draft. But that doesn't mean that you give up Jaden Daniels and give him to somebody else in your league at a really, really strong price. And so your response was, especially probably because you didn't have a significant need in that spot, it's kind of a wasted pick. But the thing that people don't understand about that concept of a wasted pick or a redundant pick in this case, or however you want to say it, is people think you have to draft too perfect. Well, there's so many wasted picks, so many players, even on good teams, that you're going to cut. Part of drafting creatively and coming to these conclusions is understanding even when you do everything right, you're going to have a bunch of misses in your draft, a bunch of holes. And so, like, the idea that you can't get by with sort of burning a 12th round pick on a second QB that's a little bit earlier than it should be for a backup quarterback or whatever is just being way too rigid in your thinking. It's not being creative enough about the ways that the draft evolves to a winning team in week 17. Because between week 17 and the draft, there's going to be a lot of guys taken in round 12 or higher that didn't hit for you. I mean, if you hit on everything from round 1 to round 12, you're winning main event type, you're winning major tournament competition type success rate there. I mean, you're winning your 12 team league if you just get 10 out of those 12 to hit, and have 2 misses in the first 12 rounds. Probably you're looking at 4 to 6 sort of as like the floor. Like, you're going to have misses. It's just part of it. And so you understand, and 4 to 6 is maybe more like the median or whatever, but those are probably some bad teams. If half of your first 12 picks don't pan out, it's probably not a very good team. But the point is this understanding of that is what led you to then seemingly throw resources away, but it's not throwing resources away. It's actually understanding the value of those resources, the value of the potential breakouts if they really do hit. You wind up getting Daniels in addition to it. I think it's a very to answer your question about like on this team with Mahomes, is a very viable thing, because what you're building in is, what if that pocket passer is wrong, which was the case with Stroud. And in this case with Mahomes, we've seen it the last couple of years. Exactly like you said, what if Mahomes looks like the last couple of years? Well, then we're going to be in a situation where we might have all the right running backs and receivers on this main event team. Our late round tight ends hit, and we're trying to get by streaming quarterbacks and figuring out, whether we can pick up Tyler Shuck. I mean, that's not you. It's tough, right? You gotta find upside at every position and have a contingency plan and a path forward. There's a whole thing about drafting, like, you're right, and I understand that, and you can play it that way too, with just taking Mahomes and saying Mahomes is going to have a good year because that's why we took him in the 7th round. We're assuming that for this team. But I like that concept that you were floating, as much as it seems a little bit almost uninformed, almost like juvenile, like a novice mistake, and yet it's very much not. That's a pretty good monologue. We're up in the pick.
So we have the Baltimore Green Bay game. the final week, and obviously this is a 3-week sprint, so it's not just the final week. Is Jordan Love a player who has that post-hype upside who would fit into that category?
Did you watch him play in the first preseason game?
Is Marshawn Lloyd your preferred pick here?
Marshawn Lloyd would be a fun pick. Yeah. I mean, I was curious if you watched him seriously because he looked bad. And Jaden Reed's hurt, even though we did draft him, obviously. And so are like other dudes like Dobbs. The vibes around the Green Bay passing game are not strong right now. I'm a little bit concerned. I'm at this point, a little bit concerned, but maybe they'll get it all figured out. The problem is the passing game was bad all last year. They just went really run heavy because, Love was hurt and all those things. And I mean, are they just going to go really run heavy again? Is that like where we're headed towards? They're having the kind of August that would make that very plausible. And now Love, after a really bad preseason game, had to have surgery in his offhand. He's going to be ready for week 1. It's not his throwing hand, but it does create the scenario where he's not working out some of these kinks through the rest of camp. So anyway, I have a hard time seeing him be the answer to that question.
So Ben, this has been a weird one, but I do really like how this team looks right now. The receivers are so much fun because you get those discounts on Addison and Reed. And the running backs are so much fun because we drafted the guys who are really flashy early. The QB is fun because you have Patrick Mahomes, and we have taken the shotgun approach at tight end. And I think that we're going to come away with something. What do we need to do to nail these last 3 picks?
Yeah. I think Fannin. I think we should definitely add Fannin to the shotgun approach. We really like him, and this is the build that we would be devastated if we didn't have Fannin on it, and he is a meaningful rookie impact. Beyond that, I'm not entirely sure. I mean, we only have 5 receivers. I think you could talk about some different types of later round receivers.
Then I have someone in the queue who drew a lot of targets, and
Wan'Dale Robinson.
He was a sensational. He's not in the queue. He was a sensational college player.
That was the most dismissive thing of all time. I love that.
Wan'Dale has just burned me too badly. He led the NFL in targets last year.
Don't be silly.
Not playable.
Your tiny brain could not understand that Wan'Dale Robinson is not in the queue. So it's Wan'Dale Robinson's profile. He drew a lot of targets and he was great in college.
That is true.
Blew
up, dominated the first preseason game in Jordan Addison-like fashion.
Oh, Malik Washington.
So we're up here. He is in the queue. He's not the name that I'm trying to lead you down the path toward. He's someone that.
Jalen Coker? No, Jalen Coker didn't do it.
I've got the rankings here, and he's after a lot of players who are going to not be drafted in this draft, and he's not bolded.
Oh wow!
So it seems
Torrey Horton.
No, but I do want to point out that Ben, we got a fun trade offer in our RotoViz Triflex Dynasty League, where we were offered Josh Allen for Cam Ward, Jordan Addison, and RJ Harvey. We love RJ Harvey and Jordan Addison too much to take that. We did counter with Ward and Breece Hall, but as I was looking at that, I saw that we have Keandre Lambert-Smith, we have Jalen Lane, we have Torrey Horton. Maybe we'll be able to trade those guys for something as opposed to just cutting them.
Nice.
But I would consider those to be late round rookie draft hits.
Oh, are you talking about Tyquan Thornton? Tyquan Thornton had a lot of targets in the game or in practice. He got an end zone target in the game.
It's so frustrating that Rashee Rice isn't going to be suspended for week 1. Because again, I mean, he did stuff that deserves to be, suspended for. And that takes Jalen Royals, who would be a fun play for this early game for Kansas City. It takes Tyquan Thornton, who, would be a fun play. I guess I do still think that Jalen Royals is someone we should be looking at here. You mentioned the receiving depth that we have, and I'm glad you mentioned Thornton, because wouldn't you still say that Royals is the guy that we would want to be looking at there?
Royals is bolded. I'm trying to figure out the answer to your question. Troy Franklin?
There we go.
Oh, Troy Franklin. Okay. God, that took me forever.
You've got him above Marvin Mims. That's got to be something.
I know. I didn't have him as far down as the other names. I was saying Torrey Horton and all these guys because you said he's way down. But I mean, Franklin's like, there's only like 5 receivers that haven't been drafted that are ahead of him. But you're not clicking the names like I am, so he's not that far down the list at this point, actually. But I have a few bolded ahead of him. I have Malik Washington, Jalen Lane, Jalen Royals, Jalen Coker, Keandre Lambert Smith, all the names that I was guessing on last night's show, because I agree with you that there's a lot of really fun late round names. But Troy Franklin, I also predicted would be in your forthcoming late round wide receiver article that you don't need to write because Ceiling Bananas listeners already know them all. I did predict there would be some Denver Broncos on that list, and so I should have known. I don't really want to take
all of that
Troy
was
Franklin.
Happening. We did select Harold Fannin to make sure we got him. We're now set then. I mean, Dallas Goedert, Isaiah Likely, Jatavian Sanders, Harold Fannin. We may lead this league in tight end scoring.
I feel great about that. I feel great that somebody took Wan'Dale Robinson 2 picks later just to make me feel a little less crazy that he clearly belongs in this range, because the way you laughed and said he's not in the queue, I'm still a little shook about. I think the guy that you want to take at quarterback, Jordan Love did go, is Bryce Young. We got Jatavian now. Why wouldn't we want Bryce Young on this team? Because he has a week 14 bye. Is that part of it?
Well, no, I think the upside for Bryce Young is pretty high. I don't know if it's high enough to burn a pick when we took Patrick Mahomes. The thing that you described there as you were going through the Stroud Daniels thing was just that, I mean, we're wrong all the time about picks. And if you have a league-winning pick staring you in the face like a Jaden Daniels, I mean, you got to understand that you can be wrong and then you can be right. And if you don't make that second pick, then you're not right. I don't know if Bryce Young does the same thing. Jalen Royals goes, that's a bit of a bummer. We are into a range where the opportunity cost of just taking Bryce Young here is pretty low.
Yeah, but we could keep firing the Malik Washington types. You could get Jarquez Hunter on this team. You didn't get him last night. He hasn't gone, right? No, he has not. Rashard Smith
got some.
He did go
14-10. Yeah, he was.
Wow.
There's been some enthusiasm for our guys in this draft.
He went Tosh Brooks, Rashard Smith, DJ Giddens. So when we took Marshawn Lloyd, all those dudes are off. I had not followed closely enough to recognize that. We got about 30 seconds left here. I would just say that I'm open here in round 17. We've lost a lot of dudes. I think we've accomplished most of what we want to accomplish as well, frankly. But maybe Malik Washington, maybe Bryce Young would be the vague directions I'd push you in. If you have an idea that you like, click that guy. Okay, you click
Let's do Young. That kind of fits with what we've discussed here on the show. Maybe he gets hot enough during that time period where Rice is suspended that if the Chiefs do have some trouble, that he can lift us there.
Yeah, I mean, so I would say that I think he actually probably does have pretty decent ceiling. He finished the season with 5 rushing TDs, I believe, in the final 6 games. He had 6 overall rush TDs, which, I mean, he didn't even play the whole season. It seems kind of significant. I'm not saying he's going to necessarily run for that many every year, but the scramble data was pretty solid. He ran a decent amount. The yards per game, both of the last 2 years on his scrambles, pretty strong. He had the sack rate fall from 10% to 6.4%, while the scramble rate jumped from 5% to 8.2%. He was able to effectively extend plays last year. I think there could be a little bit more rushing value to Bryce Young after what we saw in last year when he was playing well at the end of the year, is what I'm getting at. And so then if he's throwing the ball well, the problem is they don't run it. They don't play at a fast pace. Like Dave Canales likes to play at slow paces. He did in Tampa. He did last year. So I don't know the play volume and all that. That's sort of what you're talking about. It's hard for him to get to a real ceiling. But if McMillan's a real hit, and if Jatavian Sanders is a hit, and we're going to score the most tight end points in this league, so he's going to be, suddenly, just saying, Bryce Young, add a little scrambling, it's kind of a ceiling there.
There you go. There you go. Then we're swiftly headed for the Cam Little selection.
Oh, that countdown began in round 2. I'm surprised you waited until round 18 to bring him up. I mean, I'm amazed at this point. The way you talk about this guy. Brandon Aubrey went in round 14. I'm surprised you wanted to take Marshawn Lloyd in 15 and didn't want to lock up Cam Little, the world's greatest kicker. He sees 170-yard field goal, and all Sean can think about is that's 7 points. That was 7 points.
So many points.
So Cam Little, come on down. We got 2 picks left. One of them's got to be a defense. Our beloved Arizona already went. We are pretty done. We take a 5th tight end just for the fun of it. Is there a really deep tight end? Like, are you at all intrigued by Terrence Ferguson? And if not, do you want to try to take Tyler Higbee? Is Mike Gesicki? Oh, he went. Juwan Johnson. Cade Stover is going to take over for Dalton Schultz. Or Rondé Gadsden. Am I doing anything for you?
Terrence Ferguson goes right there. I think that he is going to end up being really interesting this season. I do think that if you draft him, you're going to have to cut him in the first couple of weeks and then probably add him back in rounds 4, rounds 5, week 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. And so he's somebody we'll be tracking as the season goes along. And the same thing is true of Ben Sinnott. And so I think both of those guys are players where you probably don't want to waste the week 1 roster spot where you can see about someone like a Malik Washington. You can see about someone like a Troy Franklin. But I do think that those players have a very strong chance to impact the season in ways that, we're not going to get from a Mike Gesicki, a Cade Otton, a Theo Johnson, a Zach Ertz, a Mason Taylor, a Hunter Henry. I think it's really interesting, in part because it doesn't really sound like the game plan or the early season approach is going to feature him as a weapon is Elijah Arroyo. But obviously after the Fant release, there is some medium-term upside there. He's pretty pricey, though. He goes 1301 in this draft.
Yeah, I think they're going to use both tight ends. I mean, AJ Barner sounds like he's going to play quite a bit early. I think I've heard some takes from people that they think AJ Barner is just going to be the dude. I don't really buy into that. I think they're both going to play. The stuff I was digging into with the Saints made it feel like, last year Clint Kubiak used a lot of 2 tight end sets. He used them a little bit interchangeably. Juwan Johnson did finally get some decent routes late in the year, but for most of the year, both guys kind of cutting into each other's routes, a little bit like Andrews and likely for the Ravens. Makes it hard to really get the routes rate up high enough, consolidate enough routes. Juwan Johnson had something like 70 targets and Moreau had something like 50. There was actually a lot of tight end targets, but neither of them was really great because it was cut about as close to 50-50 as you can kind of imagine. 70 and 50 seems high. I don't know if they had 120 total, so now I'm looking it up. The number was 66 and 43, so I wasn't that far off. Anyway, AJ Barner's on the board. We could take him. Basically the same play. Although AJ Barner never had 250 receiving yards in a college season, and I think barely crested it last year, so maybe it's not the same play.
So then as we head toward round 19 here, obviously we got caught in a draft where someone took 4 defenses last night. That left us a little bit thin. Are there names here? And we're probably going to lose a decent number between our pick at 1908 and the current pick at 1902.
Have you just been looking at defenses while I was talking about the Seahawks tight ends?
I was letting it wash over me.
I love it. What did you come up with?
Basically the take a peek defenses. Buffalo is still there. They're going to be a good defense. They have Baltimore in week 1. You can obviously draft them and then also draft a take a peek defense.
Oh, yeah.
Potentially, and then
Let's
cut the take a peek defense.
We don't have any picks we like because this is a draft where everyone took all the guys that we like. I mean, we could do
Elijah Mitchell is still someone to take to consider. I do think that Troy Franklin is going to have like a 200 free agent bid after week 1.
Did you see that Marvin Mims ran 16 routes with the first team offense and Franklin got like 1 out of 19?
That's not true. That's not true.
I know Mims's number is right. I don't know if Franklin's is right. Maybe Franklin had more than that. I'd love that your response is just nope. No, we can take Franklin. I'm totally down. Or take Buffalo. And we'll see if that stat's true on Franklin before we go again. I'm gonna look it up. I had a little interaction with our buddy Davis Maddock the other day about it. He said, no, okay, I got that wrong. Wait, he said Sutton and Mims played all the 12 personnel except for 1 snap where Franklin came in. Bryant's only snaps with the ones came as Sutton sub, Vele, and Franklin split the remaining wide receiver 3-4 snaps behind Mims and in 11 personnel. So he was like rotational. But Mims was like a starter. Kind of weird. I've been telling you that Marvin Mims is like the least likely to actually see his routes get to that point based on how he was used last year. What is in? I got some kind of hair in my mouth. Where did that come from? Let's just take Troy Franklin.
Let's take one of these defenses. Both Kansas City and Dallas are there.
Okay.
Do you have a preference between those 2 plays?
Kansas City plays Dallas? No, they play the Chargers.
Right.
And Dallas plays the Eagles. Yeah, we should take KC. You don't want to take the team playing against the Eagles.
So then one of the things that you can do would be to release one of those defenses on the Sunday morning, which that could be a lot to remember, the first Sunday morning of the NFL season. But
Troy Franklin.
That's right. You got to get him blocked. No, my take from the first preseason game was that Franklin looked like he was going to be the main guy with Cortland Sutton. And I mean, Pat Bryant is still exciting. He's going to develop as the season goes along. You are going to get some individual big games from Marvin Mims. I wouldn't take last year's usage or the first preseason games usage as in any way being definitive of what he is. He's someone who was a good prospect in the same way that Troy Franklin was one of the most underrated prospects of last year's draft. The fact that Franklin did fall in the draft and then didn't flourish immediately is obviously the reason that he goes undrafted right now. But he's going to be a different guy. And so I mean, all of this fits into why Bo Nix is, I mean, he's our guy, but he's weirdly expensive in these drafts. People think the Denver Broncos are going to be good. And for that to happen, especially when Cortland Sutton is he's a solid number one, but then for Bo Nix to pay off his ADP, you have to have other guys emerge next to him. You've got to have him rush some. You have to have RJ Harvey take some of those short passes and break them for 30, 40, 50-yard touchdowns. We'll see if it's Franklin or Mims who end up being the main guy this year. Franklin's a lot cheaper, and so that part of it is obviously very appealing.
So our final team: Saquon Barkley, Drake London, Travion Henderson, Xavier Worthy, RJ Harvey, Jalen Waddle, Patrick Mahomes, Jordan Addison, Jaden Reed, Base Shull, Tootin, Dallas Goedert, Ja'Cory Krosky, Merritt, goes by Bob, Isaiah Likely, Jatavian Sanders, Marshawn Lloyd, Harold Fannin, Bryce Young, the greatest kicker to ever live, Cam Little, Buffalo's defense, Kansas City's defense, 4 tight ends. Late, we got our backup QB. We basically didn't take any flyers. I mean, we started taking those tight ends in 13. We took Sanders early in 14. We took Lloyd in 15, and then it was another tight end, a QB, a kicker, 2 Ds. After about round 12, that Krosky Merritt pick, we didn't really have access to many of the rookie upside pieces. Keaton Mitchell, second and third year guy, I guess. All those types of dudes were going a lot earlier in this room, which made it really nice that we started this with a Saquon in the first round, Travion in the third round, RJ Harvey in the 5th round, 3 early running back scenario, and that Tootin pick that you like to add on there that I wasn't so sure about. I mean, that proved to be really, really vital, the way that we played running back early with the way that the room just sort of didn't give us any of that late. Got some of the tight ends we liked. We did lose out on Okonkwo, which I do think is probably one of the nicest ones you can get there. Cam Ward we talked about it a little, I think maybe off the air, but looked like a gunslinger. Looked like he's going to get it out. And they just don't really have a second weapon behind Ridley. It seems like Okonkwo, who ran all the routes with the first team, is going to potentially be that number 2 in this passing game, which is what you're looking for a breakout tight end. Had a great end of the year. If you want to go look at, a little bit of extra stats, I don't have them all right in front of me. Go look at Okonkwo's end of season data. We didn't draft him, so I'm hyping up somebody that's not even on our team, but we do have some fun tight ends there. Shawn, what about this build do you like? What could we have done different? What did we miss on? Take it away.
I love the fact that you pushed for Henderson early, and that made everything really fall into place, I think. To have the 3-3 to start, that's such a good build for 2025. It gives you balance, it gives you redundancy, it gives you a good structure for thinking forward to that $1 million grand prize. It's set up very nicely in that so many of the picks that we have on this team, and we haven't discussed it within this sort of framework recently, but this is the quintessential team where everybody could jump 2 rounds. Even Saquon Barkley, I mean, he again could be the clear-cut 101. You think about Drake London, we're saying he's going to lead the NFL in targets, unless Michael Penix plays extremely poorly. When you think about leading the NFL in targets in an offense playing in the dome, in these NFC South games, We were, mildly disappointed, which again, in some ways just shows you how spoiled we are through the first 17 picks in 2025, because Drake London is certainly in the mix to be next year's 103, 104. Henderson, could be next year's Jahmyr Gibbs. Gibbs goes at the 102 today. Worthy a possible riser. RJ Harvey. You look at where Chase Brown and Bucky Irving are, same type of move, right? Then Jalen Waddle has been there in the past. Jordan Addison and Jaden Reed have the potential to get there. Patrick Mahomes, the greatest quarterback of all time. Bashal Tootin, so much fun, right? You have this incredible combine, and then you go and look at the numbers, and you're like, oh, man, he was a sensational college football player. He looked bigger in preseason week 1 even than expected. He delivers the hit down by the goal line, and his teammates carry him into the end zone. Everything about that was fun. We had a couple more, big upside swings with JCM and Marshawn Lloyd. You go in and then look at those tight ends. If you don't get the tight ends early, you need to not cover yourself with floor, although Dallas Goedert arguably does that, but he has that spike week potential, which is especially relevant in week 1. But then we have other guys that we think can break out there. I like the way the pieces of the puzzle fit together and on this team, and I like the fact that it's drafted one spot away from the draft we did yesterday, and it is completely different.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun to get a mix of builds and to get into a different set of players. Some of the same names did pop up throughout, but we didn't go with an early tight end. I think for one of the first times, if we've missed on Bowers or McBride, I don't know if we've taken McBride at all. We've still tended to get Laporta or Hawkinson, to wait all the way till round 11 and take Goedert and then build out a late round tight end thing was a fun new opportunity. I don't know that Mahomes is like, he's clearly a little bit undervalued this year. I don't know that he's like a smash in round 7 in this format, but I did want to get a Mahomes team in here. We didn't necessarily have to have a Saquon team, but we built out a Saquon team as well. So we built a little bit of a different profile for our portfolio and get some different types of plays. I like that we have Mahomes with Worthy, because I think Worthy is the guy that, if Mahomes is going to have that monster season, it's a Worthy that's unlocking it. It's the explosive plays where you can start to rack up passing yardage again and those types of things. We get Travion, we get Harvey. It's fun to get them together. We get a Waddle pick in here that we don't have that, I made a little case for you. He had the rookie season. We like to do the bold predictions sometimes. We'll do one of our main events as the bold predictions draft, where every pick we make a bold prediction. I kind of gave you that with Waddle, where I was like, hey, look, his rookie year, he had a 100-catch season. That could happen, and it would be very good from the 605. It's a really fun team. It's got a lot of guys that we really like, and then a lot of plays that are maybe not the most common. And you do kind of have to hit the parlay of like being right on the guys that you like that are on this team, as well as like Saquon and Waddle and obviously Mahomes end up being key pieces and being right. One of the late tight ends, but those are more guys that we do like. I'm not saying we took anybody that we didn't like tonight, but more explicitly the targets that we're looking for in every draft. We got a lot of those guys on here, and then we got some other ones that can work, and I think are fun ones to get exposure to on a team where you're building it with a lot of your targets around that. I always think, we talk about this exposure things and like mixing things up and getting exposure to different players. I think sometimes people overplay that or overthink about that. I think the key is to do it the way we did it. I think we did it really well tonight, which is you still want to be pairing these different little exposures that work into your builds with the guys that you really believe in and are your key targets for the season. We want to have our, whatever it may be, Saquon or Waddle team also paired with Travion Henderson and RJ Harvey and Xavier Worthy and Drake London and Jordan Addison and Jaden Reed and Bashal Tootin and Harold Fannin and Jatavian Sanders and all of these guys that you're seeing on a lot of our different builds, because that's what our bets are and that's what we feel is going to be right. Doesn't mean we're going to be right, but then if Waddle or Saquon or whoever is right this year as well, we get to test whether the rest of our analysis is correct with that piece. And so we've intelligently layered that into our profile instead of like every other round in every draft. You're like, well, I want exposure to him. I want exposure to him. I want exposure to him. And you wind up with incoherent builds. And, you know, in the spots where these different players hit, they're not paired with the right other types of players. You really got to think through the ways you manage that part of it. I think that was the best thing we did tonight that I feel really excited about.
Completely agree. The ability to do a few of these and get different players, it's because we have guys that we like that we want to make sure we get on mains, not because we're intentionally trying to change things up necessarily. And we want to avoid Malik Neighbors short-circuiting every single one of our teams in case that's the way that works out. Ben, this has been so much fun. We're going to do a few more of these. We've got some other Stealing Bananas content planned for you. There's going to be a Reddit AMA. We're going to do that, projecting the 2026 first and second rounds of that for redraft shortly, which it'll be interesting to see how many guys from this team make it. Obviously, Travion, Xavier Worthy, RJ Harvey. Could we go even deeper? Is Jordan Addison going to be a part of that once he serves his suspension? But yeah, this may be the one. Saquon Barkley, long runs, fantasy playoffs, ripping out the 70 plus points. Weeks 15, 16, 17, Ben. We can look forward to that. Until then, this has been Stealing Bananas. I'm Shawn Siegele. With me, as always, is Ben Gretch. Make sure you over there signed up to Stealing Signals. It is bengretch.substack.com. He gave you the pitch yesterday, but I've got to mention, for $19 a month, you get everything that he's putting out and helping you win your 2025 drafts. We'd love to have you guys over RotoViz, coupon code RVRadio 2025 at checkout for 10% off your 1-year sub. We love you guys. We'll talk to you soon.